Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of the Embedded podcast. This time, I'm really delighted to introduce Gary Hughes. Gary's a highly respected healthcare leader who I first met way back in 2015 when I worked with a local group in Bracknell and Ascot where they were looking to develop a GP federation. And Gary and I have remained good friends and in touch really since that day. For those of you that don't know Gary, he brings a wealth of experience in system transformation. He's got a really strong focus on governance, on leadership, and on workforce development in and around general practice. He's absolutely known, and I'm going to talk to him about this morning, for advocating float versus swim mindset in leadership, where he promotes a really calm, sustainable approach, particularly when people are under pressure. And he likes to challenge closed thinking in favour of really open and adaptive leadership. As a part of that, Gary has also developed practical tools like his 7 pillars of business governance and to support effective decision making. And he's very passionate, as you'll see today, about culture, about getting the recruitment right, about retention in primary care. He's worked right across NHS organisations and he worked with industry. He's also well known for working with industry partners to really try and help improve our collaboration and alignment between the health leaders and the suppliers. So good morning, Gary, and how are you? Looking very
Morning,
bright and
Scott.
orange.
Yeah. It's for my business. Orange is sort of one of the brand colours, but
Okay.
that's not why I'm wearing it. But thanks for having me on here, and that's a lovely intro. So
Well,
yeah,
that's how I know you. I mean, that's the Gary that I know and love and very much respect.
yeah,
And when I was looking back, it's hard to believe. Where's the time
I
gone?
know.
10
Yeah,
years.
yeah,
It's mad.
I know. And the best bit is that we've remained in touch, as you say, good
Yeah.
friends, and absolutely.
Yeah,
Um,
totally.
but
Totally.
yeah, it's lovely intro. So yeah, and I'm
Uh,
delighted to be on here. Delighted that you're doing a podcast because I know you've got so much to say for industry and for primary care and the wider NHS. So yeah, delighted that you're doing this. I think it's
and I,
brilliant.
I think we're in for real. Before I dive into a few of the questions I've got for you, I think we're in for a really interesting time ahead, particularly around this development of integrated neighbourhood teams and the impact that could have on general practice. Are we losing primary care networks? Are INTs part? We still don't know. It's not really clear.
Yeah, yeah, I'd agree. And I've thought for a long time as well that so much of where this ends up could be in the hands of primary care if they just grasp that metal.
Oh,
But
totally.
they haven't done it enough. We'll see if they
I,
do going
I
forwards.
know. I know from all our conversations, you'll agree with this thing I'm about to say. I think for general practice, the opportunity around integrated neighbourhood teams needs to be something they lead and develop
Yeah,
and don't allow to happen to them. Because if it happens to them, goodness knows where we'll end up.
I absolutely, I quite agree. There are pockets you see around the country of whether it's federations or
Yeah,
really good primary care, networks and alliances where they have grasped that and they are doing
yeah.
really great things. It's just not enough. But yeah,
I
I'm,
like
I'm with
that
you.
phrase, pockets. I use that phrase a lot.
Yeah,
Pockets of
yeah,
brilliance.
yeah.
And
There are.
and
Yeah,
often we don't hear enough about them.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. If you get on LinkedIn, and we're both on
Yeah, we
LinkedIn a
are.
lot, you see those people on there, but they're
We
not
do.
all of them. I mean, not everybody does LinkedIn, but you do see them, and there are some great people. I know you work with a lot of them as well, so there are some great people.
That's a brilliant entry point to where I want to go with you because it was actually one of your posts on LinkedIn that really sparked my first question, where you talked and you really contrasted high pressure leadership situations where people often feel like we must swim.
Mm.
With your view is it's actually more realistic to float as your mindset because
Yeah,
that eases some of the pressure and it can improve performance. Do you think we could unpack how
yeah,
leaders can
yeah,
adopt that float mentality in real time and
yeah,
whether you see it as a stepping stone towards swimming or is it a valuable standalone approach?
yeah. And I'll give the background to all of this. I
Yeah,
started sort of putting posts, short blogs on LinkedIn back in 2017. And I tend to sort of write on what I'm seeing and experience that's going on in sort of primary
Mm.
care. So that float or swim was a recent one, not too long ago that I did. And it was actually about my situation. I was talking up in Management in Practice London,
Mm.
and I hadn't done a big talk for a while, and it was on actually on the 7 key ingredients of a successful business in primary care. So very relevant. I hadn't spoken to a big audience for quite a while, and I was sort of quite keyed up about it. And I wanted to just make sure that I was giving myself every chance to succeed. So I sort of thought, okay, look, I don't have to swim. I
Yeah.
can actually, it doesn't have to be just, it's going to be a sink or swim. I can just float. And actually, for me, I can't swim. So to use that sort of approach analogy was sort of quite useful. But I think bringing it back to where I suppose we are in primary care in this conversation, I see all too often that primary care leaders, general practice, they want to go for the great biggest goal, and they're thinking there straight away. But actually, you don't have to go that far. Don't
No,
shoot for the moon. Just don't. It hasn't got to be sink or swim. There's that in the middle. We can just float. Just get started. Just take some of the pressure off your
I really like
teams
that.
and you. Taking some of the pressure off and just start smaller. Let's get started, and
Yep.
then you can take the next step, and then you can take the next step. So that, as I say, it was an
I
analogy
think
that
that's a
I used
great
to take pressure off me.
It's a
But
great analogy, and it's one I use a lot with the industry. That the industry often wants to do a whole system, a whole integrated care system. We're going to change it. And I'm like, that's really tough. I haven't got an
yeah,
example of that anywhere. So I'm like you, I'd rather start with one practice or maybe one primary care network. And
yeah,
then we do a really great job there and we scale it up to a place footprint. And then, of course, if you do a really good job at place, the other place footprints potentially want to follow suit. So I
yeah,
really like that as an
yeah.
approach.
Interesting what you said about industry there. I think I spent 2 years working in
Yeah.
market access. And yes, industry would come to you with bigger budgets than primary care are used to, and bigger ideas and plans. And it always felt that, you'd be dealing with one person in that one pharma company, but it just felt
Yeah.
like there were bigger forces behind saying, we've got to get something big, we've got to get something big. Start with one practice, start
Yeah.
with one PCN. And
Yeah, I
actually,
agree.
once you've got something evidence working there, it's going to be easier to build that.
And that touches really on. There are a lot of people who are very close-minded and very fixated on. I've got to do something. I've got to speak to the ICB and I've got to get something system-wide. And I know that you warn constantly against leaders with closed minds, and I've seen you highlight that what that will end up in is it stifles innovation, it drains morale completely because people
Yeah.
can't get that level of success. So for you, what are the key habits or practices that you recommend leaders use to kind of really guard against that rigidity and foster that much more open-minded nature to develop in a mature organization?
Yeah, and it's interesting. I can see, you've been reading the posts, done your homework, because
I did.
again, I've written about that that combating the closed-mindedness, because in my time in general practice, and it's not just something that you see in general practice, but in general practice, I've often seen GP partners, and they tend to be the ones that are primarily that taking the leadership roles,
Yeah.
and they may be, PCN clinical directors, federation leads, sitting on ICBs, but they are often quite closed. And I don't know whether that's because of, and I'm going to be honest here, I don't know whether it's because of ignorance. They don't understand what they should be doing. I don't know whether it's because of arrogance. They think they know best, and
Mm.
that does happen. And also that sense of entitlement. I'm the GP with professional qualification. I'm in that position. I don't need to be doing anything else other than what I think. But what I think you need to do to combat it, and what I believe you need to do to combat it, is that actually make sure that you're looking out for different perspectives and opinions from your team, your fellow
Yeah.
stakeholders that you're working with. Because I always found, in leadership and management positions, I still do, somebody on the front line, that might be a receptionist on the front line, will have a different view to you and probably going to be seeing something you're not going to see. So,
Absolutely.
and if we take that to industry, if I'm in industry, bringing something into primary care to pilot
Mm.
something. Yes, I've got to be speaking to the GP partner, the
Yeah,
PCNCD. But actually, if I'm going to be putting something in to trial something, what do the receptionists think of how this is going to work?
totally.
You
Oh,
know,
totally.
what do they think? What does the nurse think? Because I can remember working in MTech Access, and I'd be working with clients, and they'd be wanting to speak to the GP partner because they felt it was the GP that was going to be managing the long-term condition patients, and
Yeah,
whether it was inhalers or whatever it
yeah,
was. And when you said to them, actually, the nurses do all of that,
yeah.
it was didn't know that.
So,
So make sure you're getting to speak to other people, and
oh,
finding out what they think.
we'll maybe get you back to have another conversation with me at some point in the future because this is a hot topic for me.
Yeah,
That bit about we target the visible stakeholders, but we miss the invisible stakeholders,
uh,
and they're the ones that actually do the work, and they'll be the
yeah,
one that go, no, 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 we're not doing that because, and oh, I see it a lot where, we think we're, the GP or the lead is going to make a decision that we benefit from, and then suddenly it all comes down like a stack of dominoes because they then go and talk to the team internally who we've not given a position to, we've not engaged them, they don't understand what we're doing, and you meet all the blocks and barriers. It's a really great
yeah.
example that you've just given there.
And I love that term, invisible stakeholders. I'll probably pinch that and use that myself.
You're very
But
welcome.
it is about making sure that you're asking others and getting their perspectives and opinions.
Totally.
I think you can't be content with what you know and what you've always done. You've got to be open to that new
Yeah.
ideas, new thoughts that others are going to bring. And I think, I sort of said about whether it's arrogance, entitlement, ignorance as well. You've got to be willing to challenge your own
You
thinking
have
as
to.
well. You've got
Yeah,
to be
totally.
willing to do that. And I think that I'm saying this very much thinking of general practice. But if I'm pharma industry
Yeah.
thinking I've got to bring something in, you've got to be doing the same things again because what you think might work possibly isn't going to.
It's where I think discovery before design becomes
Yeah.
the language. You have to take the time to sit down with Gary and actually get him to map his whole pathway in its entirety.
Mm.
Where are the blocks, the barriers, the backlogs, the steps, the workarounds because the pathway doesn't flow correctly, the money doesn't flow correctly. You have to understand all of that before you start proposing a new approach. And this is where again another one of your articles you talked about. I forget this right. Simplicity plus preparation equals success.
That's
And you
it.
really, really reminded me there about that bit about don't make it overly complex because the minute you start to make it complex, it will dilute the clarity and then it dilutes the delivery.
Yeah.
So, how do you strike the balance between
Yeah.
delivering simple, powerful messages, but don't oversimplify it and certainly avoid making it overly complicated?
Yeah. And the background to that particular post that I spoke about there, it was funnily enough, it was another talk where I've
Right.
given. And I just went into it thinking that, I had everything right. And actually, it was way too complicated. I had too much content, too much information. And it didn't go very well. From my point of view, it didn't go very well. But I suppose, the bringing this back to what's relevant for this conversation is, again, this, and it links to nicely to this float versus swim mindset that we opened
Yeah.
up with here, is if you've got an idea and a project, and it might be industry have the idea, but it might be you might be in general practice have an idea.
Yeah.
Don't overcomplicate it. Don't overcomplicate it. And I see this as industry when they pitch things with slide decks that are too big, too much information.
Yeah.
What's the headline? How's it going to benefit patients? Just give me that.
Oh,
Or
that's one of your other posts. You called it. It'll come back to me. It will. Small nails.
oh yeah, yeah,
You
well,
talked
yeah,
about that. You don't come with something that you're back to that. Don't bring me 400 slides because
no,
I'm going to glaze over. I'm not going to get it. It needs to be
yeah,
short and sharp. I have a phrase with industry a lot. Please don't bore us. Get to the chorus.
yeah,
Tell me what I need to know. Tell me what you need me to do. And I'm much more likely to engage than if you just deluge me in a load of clinical information and a load of slides where I'm then left working out what you want me to do.
yeah.
That's not going to work.
No, absolutely. If I were industry going into talk pitch to GP GPs or anybody from primary care or the NHS at the moment, tell me how you're going to help my workload.
Absolutely.
Don't tell me how much money you're going to save me.
Yeah,
Tell me how you're going to help my workload. Tell me how that patient is only going to come in once a year, not 3 times a year.
that's it.
That's what I want to know. So tell me that. Don't go through 10 slides and then tell me that. Tell me that right at the start. I'm going to help your
Yeah.
workload. I'm going to cut it by a
I
half.
find that fascinating that you've zoomed in on that, because what you don't know is that's the top ask I get from my NHS
Yeah,
customer base. Scott, what have you got in your armory right now, project wise, that would reduce my workload? I had one of my really, really good GPs up in North Warwickshire actually say to me about 3 or 4 months ago, Scott, see what you're about to pitch me. Is it going to reduce my workload? Because if it's not, I probably don't need the pitch. And she
yeah.
was as blunt as that, not to be rude, not being aggressive or anything like that, just saying, look, where I am right now, if this doesn't impact my workload, it's probably not going to make it onto the things that I'm going to spend time thinking about. So it's really interesting that you've picked up on that as well.
Absolutely. It's the time I had in industry, it was always the thing that we were telling our clients as well, how they, want to know how you're going to help their workload. I think knowing your audience as,
Yeah,
the industry, speaking to the GPs, primary care, whoever it's going to be, understanding your audience as well is important because you could be
yeah,
speaking to maybe 3 or 4 GPs and you might get one who's all about the patient.
yes,
So because they're not all the same, but
no,
they are all struggling with workload. But if you can say, I'm going to help with your workload by this, but I'm also going to help the patients because
yeah.
there are some GPs and some clinicians that are very, very patient focused. So if you can right at the top, I'm going to help the workload, I'm going to help the patients with this benefit.
Again, I think it's a really interesting conversation that we're having here, because again, one of the things I talk about a lot, and it's certainly embedded in the book, there's a whole piece on it, is just what you've described. That I picked this, I stole this from one of my customers, a lovely GP by the name of Yusuf up in Hartlepool in Stockton. He was the first one that kind of said, this is how I'm thinking, Scott. I thought, I'm going to adapt that. And I turned it into what we call the perfect triangle. And Gary, you've pretty much just explained the perfect triangle, which is at the top of the triangle. What's the win for the patient? Are we improving the patient outcome, or does it mean that they don't need as many appointments? Can we do a more holistic? What are we doing for the patient right at the top of the triangle? Then down in the bottom corner, what's the win for the NHS? Is it fewer appointments in general practice? Is it fewer referrals to secondary care? Or is it fewer non-elective admissions? Are we tackling inequalities? Are we closing the unwarranted variation out of our pathway? Are we eliminating that? What are we doing? And then once you've done that and explained that really, really well, then have the dialogue about what is the win for you as a collaborating partner
Yeah,
in this project. But that's got to be tied back to what's the win for the patient. And
yeah.
if you do that and do it really well, it stops you leading with the product.
Yeah, absolutely, definitely, definitely. And none of what you mentioned talked about how much it saves money for the system, or
No.
because, if you're talking to primary care, they're not interested. They don't
Okay.
see that money.
No.
So yeah,
That
I'm just
sits
gonna,
somewhere in somebody else's budget, so it's not really their
yeah,
responsibility, and they therefore don't see it as their responsibility.
yeah, no. So I mean, they're great points, and that the triangle. I think I've heard you speak about that before, and I think it's great
Yeah.
model to bear in mind.
Again, you have a model around the 7 pillars of business governance. I don't expect you to cover all 7 for a second.
Yeah,
And and I remember the post where you talked about strengthening practices. I think it was a half-hour webinar that
yeah.
I sat and watched. Is there one or two of those that you could highlight, maybe share a practical example of how they tangibly improve decision making and the leadership within general
Yeah.
practice? You maybe got a couple of nuggets
Yeah.
tucked up your sleeve for us.
Yeah, definitely. And it's interesting, the 7 pillars framework, it's for for many years now, I've sort of worked with practice PCNs and I've worked on the 7 pillars of clinical governance, which is a
Yeah.
really well-known model. But what I do very much is about making your practice PCN Federation the best business it can be. So I wanted something that I could work on that aspect, the business. So the 7 pillars are organizational structures, effective leadership, regulatory compliance, financial management, risk management, information governance, and stakeholder engagement. Now, to give you your 2 examples,
Yeah.
And I was thinking, let's give you two that I think are very relevant for today. And the first one is risk management.
Yeah.
All too often, I see primary care networks and practices, and I'm working with one quite closely at the moment, where they're not aware of all of their risks. And certainly at the moment, I think the risks for a practice, a PCN, a federation are higher than they've ever been.
Yeah.
But most leaders, they're not aware of all their risks. They're certainly not actively recording them or measuring them. And if they're not doing that, they can't then be doing everything they can to mitigate them. Um, as I said, I think they're higher than they've ever been at the moment.
Yep.
So what I've suggested, or what I suggest PCNs and practices do, is they make this one of the seven pillars using risk
Yeah.
management is one of the key things they do, and they list all the risks, and
Yep.
they list what they're doing to mitigate them, and they're reviewing this every 6 months. Certainly, I'm sure we'd say it, Scott. Businesses that we've worked in, bigger businesses,
Yeah.
they do this. They have their
Do it
risk
all the time.
register. They have their risk register, and they've got their eyes on it. They're reviewing it, and they're managing it. And it informs your decisions as well,
Does.
because you know where you've got to focus your resources. You know what you've got to be making your decisions around. And I think that one of the best examples I can give on a risk at the moment for general practice is succession planning.
Yeah.
We have issues with, there's an exodus of staff, difficult to get new staff in. If a practice loses their long-term condition nurse, their senior
Yeah.
partner, or as I always say, their practice manager,
Yeah.
they have got a huge problem.
Yeah.
So, the risk register, major thing, looking at all of those risks, and a big one would be succession planning.
Yep.
If I were to bring this back to what we're talking about with an
Yeah.
industry audience, I'm starting something new. We'll start that project with, okay, what are the risks as
Yeah.
well?
Totally.
What have we got to be watching out for, and what
Eh,
have we got to manage? And industry will probably be better placed to take the lead because it's a more formal
Yeah.
sort of business activity. They've got more experience in, but that's sort of one thing. And then, should I give you a second example?
You can. Just one quick thing to pick up there with you though. I mean, I remember you and I doing that way back in 2015-16, developing a
Yeah,
risk register for the new
yeah,
GP Federation. And a lot of it was around what happens if one of the board of
yeah,
directors leaves or the practices don't engage. We sign a contract and the practices don't engage, and we put in place mitigation to do that. That was because one of the things that we were really careful about was always having a contingency.
yeah,
So there was an ability to pull people together. So something's come up that we didn't anticipate or couldn't have anticipated when we were developing our risk register, but now it's here. So we,
yeah,
we don't ignore it, we have to manage it. So I think, again, you're really nailing down this way of having simple but highly effective governance and process in place that protects the business, because it's what most people forget. If you don't protect the business, suddenly the thing that pays all the bills isn't there
yeah.
anymore.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. A
The
second
other,
example would be great, mate. Go on.
yeah, well, the other example is the last pillar, stakeholder engagement.
Ah, huge.
Um, we've just had the 10-year plan. We've
Yeah.
got to be building neighbourhoods. We've been talking about this for years,
Years.
but again, we've got to build neighbourhoods. So that stakeholder engagement is so, so important. Now, we should have been doing this for ages, but most areas haven't. We said at the beginning, there's pockets that have. But I'd say, take the lead. If primary care are listening to this, take the lead, or
Yeah.
you're going to be told what to do. But if I'm outside and I'm industry, I still think there's a way that you can start to help and shape and influence. Have
Yeah.
conversations with, ICBs, PCNs, federations. You can still help and play your part to sort of bring, it
Completely.
might be more you're facilitating it to happen, but you
Yep.
can. So, I think where I've seen it works well, it's usually because it's a GP partner that's maybe leading a federation or a PCN, or they've got a position on an ICB. But quite often you might see it's a manager. There are very, very capable
Yeah.
practice managers,
Oh,
federation
there
managers,
are.
PCN managers. And I'm sure in industry, are talking to them. If you're not, find out who they are
Yeah,
because they
totally.
make things happen.
Yep.
And that would be the other thing. I'd be finding out who you need to speak to, and I'd be having those conversations as well. Help. build these new neighbourhood providers that we need to see.
Totally. I mean, that actually dovetails really beautifully into my last question for you, which is all around collaboration, because I know you've done lots of this, and I really want to see if I can get you to open up to the audience about it. So I know from our work, from work that I've heard about from you, you absolutely help people navigate change, the governance, the workforce challenges, all the things that we've talked about today. But from your perspective, what does great collaboration look like when it's between health system leaders and then the pharma, the medtech, and the device companies? And then if there was one thing that you say they get wrong most often, what is it? What goes
Yeah, yeah, and if we're saying great collaboration between the parties that you've mentioned, it could be, I think, great collaboration in anything. Great
yes.
collaboration looks the same. But I think when it's great, and I'm sitting here as I'm talking about this, and I can think of a federation that I'm working with that have some great collaboration going on with their ICS,
Okay.
and also some practices that are very good at working together. They've got, when it's great, it looks like this. They've got a shared goal.
Yep.
The different parties, the benefits they might get might be different, but they all share the same goal. And it might be that it might be that we're going to reduce patient visits by a third. That might be what an industry partner might want to do as a goal, and that might be that the practice wants as a
Yeah.
goal. But the benefits, the industry partner is going to get their product in, used, tested, trialed, whatever it'll be. The practice is going to reduce their workload. So you might get
Yeah.
the benefits, but they're sharing their goal. So I think great looks like you've got a shared goal. The patient is going to be involved and at the heart. I think
Yeah.
too often when I was working in industry, that wasn't considered. And too often working in primary care, it's not considered either. But, patients, get them at the heart, find out what they want, what they need, what they can bring to this. You're also going to have great communication. When collaboration's working, you're going to have great communication. And that means that it's going to be easy, it's going to be open, it's going to be transparent. It's not, as often happens in general practice, it's constant, frequent, in the way. But
Yeah.
it's just going to be easy, open, transparent. And most importantly, all of this is going to mean that you've got trust. You've got
Yep.
trust. And again, I think often the relationships exist between whether it's, industry and primary care or within primary care, and the relationships are an uneasy happiness, let's just say. That's how they are. I think the thing that goes wrong most of the time is that at the start, there's a lack of understanding of each other's worlds. And we said
Yeah.
about, industry doesn't often know exactly how primary
Yeah.
cares work and things. So I think the start is a lack of understanding of each other's world. Within the NHS, that can be the same as well because, secondary care doesn't understand primary care, vice
Yep.
versa. And then you don't have that shared goal, that one thing that we're all aiming for. And you then find that you've got poor communication. And then there's usually, as often as well, there's an insufficient sort of commitment to this in terms of the time and the resources that
Yep.
I'm going to put in. And they all feed off one another. And
Yes.
ultimately, there's no trust. But, if you say what's the one thing, it starts with, I don't have an understanding of each other's world. Start with that, get to know each
That's
other,
the
and then
yeah.
make your goal. And then all these other things will come.
That's the discovery before design bit for me. You
Yeah.
have to discover. You have to
Yeah.
sit down and get to know each other because there's a great word you use there, trust. I
Yeah.
often think if you take the time at the beginning to put the foundations in and you build the trust leads to the collaboration and the collaboration leads to the outcome. If you
Yeah.
don't put the foundations and the trust in place, well then, as you say, got different vision of what this looks like, different outcomes, different, and it just doesn't work. You watch it unravel in front of you.
Yeah.
I'd also add one extra bit that, again, at the risk of you disagreeing with me, I also think that you really need to understand and work on the NHS agenda, not on your product agenda. It's got to be NHS agenda that we're working with. Because if you're not addressing a known problem for the NHS, they're not going to engage.
Yeah. And I think you're absolutely right. I completely agree. And I don't know what you'll say to this, but my time working in market access,
Yeah.
I always felt that to get industry to work on the NHS agenda or align with it wasn't difficult. There's plenty of scope
Yeah.
there that you
Tons.
can, whether it's population health would be a
Yeah,
big thing at the moment, or whether it's, workload that we said about, it's actually not difficult. But industry didn't seem to always take that as a starting point, right? What's the agenda? I want to fit with that.
yeah.
Do you find that as well?
I do find that. I had a really interesting conversation October last year with, again, one of my lovely customers, Dr. Catherine Patrick. Catherine's a GP down in Somerset. She's also the part-time medical director for Somerset Foundation Trust for Primary Care, so the vertically integrated model.
Yeah,
And Catherine said, just what you've said literally there. She said, I have no problem. I can still remember she sat with her hand up. She said, I have no problem with industry coming in and asking me as many questions as they want about what's on my agenda. But then they've got to pick something off that agenda that we can work on and collaborate on together. If you do that and do it well, I'm going to engage. If you don't, if you come in and you're not really interested in what's on my agenda and it becomes about your agenda, 5 minutes after you've gone out the door, I'm going to have forgotten we've even met. And you've just pretty much summarized that. You have to work on there. You've got to do the discovery before the design. We're going to have that shared vision and shared goal, or it isn't going to go anywhere.
yeah. Yeah, and if you don't want them to forget 5 minutes after, make sure that you've given them that headline. I'm going to do this
This is
right at
it.
the beginning.
That's it.
Yeah,
It's that. Please don't bore us. Get to the
yeah,
chorus. Tell me what it is that you can do to help me with one of my many known problems, and I'm going to engage with you.
absolutely, absolutely.
Oh, Gary, what a wonderful, wonderful time that has been with you. I'm so grateful. I really value the fact that you've given up your time to come and talk to us this morning and share your insights. Some great, really great key takeaways there around that bit about discovery before design, work on the NHS agenda, patient, be patient centric, think about it
Yeah,
from a patient perspective. Some fabulous insights, and I'm really grateful to you, mate. Thank you.
absolute pleasure. And well, I'm interested in your book, Embedded. I think that's going to be a great thing when that comes out. And I think when I saw you post on LinkedIn about that, that's got to be on every bookshelf of every pharma company representative, whatever. It's got to be. Yeah, I think
That's really
that's going to be
kind.
a good one.
I mean, I'm kind of, well, you've done it. You're a published author, so
Yeah,
you know
yeah,
the
long time
feeling, but you
ago. Yeah,
wonder, will I sell one? Well, I know my mum will buy one because mum's always wondered what I do, and doesn't really understand it. So I'm sure mum and dad will have a copy. And then slowly but surely, I've had lots of really great positive
yeah,
feedback. People saying, where can I get it? When can I get it? I've even had people jokingly, I think, saying to me, can I get a signed copy? I'm sure if people want that, we can absolutely sort it. But yeah, we're a matter of weeks away from publishing
yeah,
at the time of recording.
it's going to be great.
Magic, mate. Thank you. And thank you again for taking the time to come and talk to us this morning.
Absolute pleasure, Scott. Anytime.
Cheers, Gary. Thanks again.